problem is, and I thank Eric for just saying he loves me. It's very important to feel that your children love you. And so my problem is I'm always prepared. See, that's the problem. So I'm ready to preach. In St. Matthew's Gospel, chapter 6, and I just want to read verse 9. And it says, after this manner, therefore, pray ye, our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. When you consider the relationship between Father and Son, it becomes actually the substratum of what we understand and how we measure relationships. When I was growing up, what I was told is that man means manage. And my step-grandfather was, he was 17 years younger than my grandmother. My step-grandfather was extraordinarily given to whipping. When I consider my sister Grace she's never touched any of her children. And my kids will tell you that I never touched them. I only spanked my boys once in their lives. And I spanked them once because they allowed the neighbor's son to pour dirt in their sister's hair. And my ex-wife was about to destroy this fellow. So I spanked him out of just being nervous about what she was going to do to this guy. And that's the only time I ever touched them. Now, it wasn't that I didn't discipline them because I was whipped all the time. It wasn't that I didn't discipline them because I am extraordinarily intoxicated with the exuberance of my verbosity. So what you do with a whip is what I do with words. So I would spank them verbally, and then they'd discover that they were whipped. The communication that God had with his son Jesus becomes the substratum of relationships, not only from a theological perspective, but also from a very practical perspective. And if you notice carefully that the humanity of Jesus was his vulnerability. His vulnerability came from his mother's side, not from his father's side. And if I were to argue that, I'd argue it from the point of view of every man needs to be strong but sensitive. And one of the problems that we have is that we're taught never to cry, never to show weakness. And we're taught to be vociferously strong but not sensitive. So most of us don't even deal with the feminine side. And if God is creator and God is the maker of all things, then there's a sensitive side and a female side to God. I'm going to teach some grown-ups one day. To have a sensitive side does not make a man weak. Because it's our sensitivity that makes us vulnerable. And I'm beginning to learn that vulnerability is not a problem. You just have to choose who you're vulnerable around. Because given the right relationship, being vulnerable is not a problem. Satan didn't see Jesus' strength because he saw his vulnerability. And the communication that God had is inside of this vulnerability, I am God. This is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased. The problem that we have is oftentimes we don't mentor as men, and we don't raise our sons to be like us. And one of the problems about not mentoring is you end up with competition. See, I don't worry about my sons competing with me, even though in some instances they try. I remember I didn't want my boys to run around in the streets. So what I did was I had a basketball court built in my property. So I had a half court built concrete. And I would compete with them on the court. It's good to have kids when you're young because you can always... And when he got to the place where I would dunk on him, hold the ball over him like this, and then Eric, my son who just spoke, happened to hold the high jump record to Claremont College. Today he's been over 7 feet. He jumped over 7 feet. So imagine when he got to be 16 or 17. Now he's dunking on me. But he apologizes. It goes like this: Dad, I'm not as little as I used to be. So he apologizes for dunking on me. But their success becomes my joy. Because everything I had, I endeavored to put it in them. And one of the problems in our community is our fathers have disappeared. And because fathers have disappeared, kids find strength in gangs. See, the communication of Jesus and his Father was, this is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased. And the significance of a father is to raise a son, to have his strengths, but have his mother's sensitivity. Because vulnerability is human. And ultimately, it makes for wisdom. Can I say that again? Vulnerability is what makes for wisdom. Here's how the Bible puts it. The Bible says that we ought to be wise as a serpent, but harmless as a dove. But where does wisdom come in? He says, be wise first. Amen. Before you're harmless. Can I say that again? If you're going to be harmless as a dove, you had better be wise as a serpent. Because vulnerability brings wisdom. When you know you don't have the strength, then you have to have the wisdom. See, one of the problems of dealing with men who are strong is women trying to be as strong as men instead of being wise. Because you can't match him physically, but you can outdo him psychologically, intellectually, and mentally. I spoke to 20,000 women, and all the guys got on me because I gave away all the secrets. And I'm not hooping today. The wisdom comes from vulnerability. It does not come from matching a man physically. The Bible talks about the woman as a weaker vessel. But weaker vessel is only physical. It has nothing to do with her brilliance or her brain. See, when men sit around and talk about women being a weaker vessel, it has nothing to do with her intellect. Let me put another way. I've got glasses at home. And some glasses are thicker than others. If you have a prestigious wine glass, it's very thin. But if you have a juice glass, it's thick and solid. But you can put into the juice glass what you put into the wine glass. It's just a container. So when the Bible calls a woman the weaker vessel, he's only dealing with her physicality.
Yes. Amen.
I have a size 12 foot. How many women have size 12 feet? The physicality does not eliminate intellectuality because it's only a container. And the physical significance of the woman is dimorphosis because she has to bear children. That doesn't make her less intellectually less wise than a man. So what we have done is, because we haven't been intellectually astute as we should, we force the issue with our physicality. And we reduce the woman because of our lack of sensitivity and vulnerability. So we feel as if we're being mistreated or used. by the woman. Can I go deeper before I go higher? When we fail to handle our responsibility, and the problem is feelings versus duty. And when our feelings override, instead of our duty being in charge, we fail. Because if we don't feel good about the woman, we don't handle our responsibility.
Amen. Amen.
But the child has my name. And if the child has my name, then my ego should be
Amen. You better
that I take care of my business. See, many people don't like people with egos. But my ego makes me take care
Amen.
of my business.
Yes.
I'm almost about to hoop. When feelings and duty, if I feel more than I have responsibility, because a lot of times the problem with men, with us, is we feel that you ought to give us respect. But respect doesn't come from love. Respect comes from your ability to handle responsibility. See, you can love somebody you don't respect. Oh, I'm in trouble now. Because respectability comes from your ability to handle responsibility. It don't come from love. So a whole lot of times you love somebody you don't respect, because they don't have the ability to handle responsibility. Here's the problem. The problem is, if you go with your feelings instead of your duty, you have conflict because you're feeling more than your duty. So if feelings are above duty, then if you don't feel good about the woman, you don't take care of the kids. We're talking fathers, right?
Yes.
If you don't feel good about her, you fail in your duty. Now, one of the things that I discovered as it related to my kids was none of them ever asked to come here.
Amen.
I was having some fun. So at the end of the day, my kids are a product of my fun. I'm going to teach some grown folk. So all of you with kids were having a bad time when you had the kids. Well, let's work with that. Let's work with that.